Good afternoon, everybody. Special broadcast of the Nathan Ivey Show. As I told you, I'm joined by a special guest. Her name is Cerise Castle. She's a reporter with Knock LA, and very privileged to have her. Cerise, thank you for your time.
Thanks so much for having me. It's great to be here.
Yeah, I want to get into the work that you're doing, and I was made aware of it by the interview you did with the Breakfast Club. And I want to circle back around and just talk about the importance of that platform and just talk about the experience. And hopefully, it's raised more. It certainly did in this case. It's the reason why I'm aware of you, even though I know I've I've since known that you're prolific. You've done a lot of interviews. You're pretty much putting the word out there. But for folks who are unaware of you and have no idea who you are, just tell us a little bit about you and the work that you're doing.
Definitely. So, my name is Cerise Castle. I am a reporter here in the Los Angeles area. And for the past year and a half, I have been reporting mostly on police accountability, corruption inside the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department, specifically focusing on the 18 deputy gangs that I was able to uncover for my series Tradition of Violence. I've since anecdotally heard of a few more gangs, so now I think there are about 24 operating inside the sheriff's department. But I wrote the first ever historic accounting of gangs inside of a police department.
Wow. And how did you start this work? Very dangerous work, but how did you start this? What was the motivation behind it?
Deputy gangs were something that I've heard about my entire life. I grew up here in Los Angeles, and it was something I always heard about from friends, from teachers, my mom, my older brother. Um, there were sometimes, words of advice like stay away from white police officers with shaved heads. They're probably Vikings, things like that. And it never really made sense to me that the police, even though my interactions with them had been pretty negative. But they would still come to my school and say, don't join gangs, stay away from gangs are bad, all that stuff. And it just didn't really make sense to me that they themselves were in gangs as well, as I was being told by my mom, by my teacher, trusted adults. So it was a question that I had most of my life. Fast forward to May of 2020, I was working for a local radio station here in Los Angeles, and I was covering a protest that had was being put on in response to the murder of George Floyd. While I was covering that protest, I was shot with a less lethal munition by a police officer, despite repeatedly identifying myself as press. And the resulting injuries led to me being placed on bed rest for about 6 months. I couldn't walk. I couldn't, go do my job as I normally did. I had to just sit on the couch. Um, and just a few days after I was shot, an 18-year-old young man by the name of Andres Guardado was shot and killed by two deputies that were trying to get into a gang. The way that you get into that particular gang, called the Executioners, is allegedly by shooting and killing a civilian. And once you've done that, you get a tattoo of a skeleton wearing a Nazi helmet, and you are a full fledged deputy gang member. So when Andres was killed, it came out pretty quickly that the deputies who killed him were trying to make their bones and get into this deputy gang. And when I heard that, I very quickly remembered all of the stories that I had heard from the time I was a little girl up until that current moment about deputy gangs. And I thought, now is the time for me to use the 6 months that I have to be on the couch to thoroughly investigate who these gangs are, what they want, that sort of thing. And I started doing that. I had also just taken a class that was offered for free by the Ida B. Wells Society about how to do in-depth investigations into government agencies. That's something that is still up on their website. I encourage everyone that is interested in this to check that out. So I had a new skill set that I had recently equipped myself with to do this. So the resulting product of that research is the 15-part series, Tradition of Violence.
Yeah, which is pretty in depth, and I won't lie and say I've read it all, but it is pretty thorough and very interesting. And what's the website? Where can people find it again?
You can find all of that reporting as well as a database I built of with some great help from the folks at Knock LA, and that details all deputy gang members and alleged associates. And all of that is available at lasdgangs.com.
LASD gangs. And again, I want people to understand when you say deputy gangs, you're talking about law enforcement. You're talking about sheriff deputies. What was through your investigations? Have you been able to find out what precipitated this? Like, have these gangs always been in LA, or was it a response to the street gangs, which we've heard so much about?
Yeah, I think when you look at the history, going back, the Crips were the first gang that was founded here in the Los Angeles area. They were founded in 1969, actually in response to police violence that had been rampant in the community. I'm sure most people who are listening to this show may have heard a little thing about the so-called Watts riots that occurred in 1965. This was sort of a 30-year precursor to what happened in 1992 and then what happened almost 30 years exactly later in 2020. And essentially what happened was the police beat a young man, I forget his name, but a young black man who was driving home through the Compton area, or sorry, the Watts area, and that led to rebellion. And also, as a product of that rebellion, was the formation of community groups. And that community group, I forget what CRIP stands for, but it's Community Rising something. But the CRIPs were really a direct response to documented police violence that was happening in the area at the time. The first police gangs that we know about are about 4 years after the solid establishment of so-called street gangs in the Los Angeles area. And it's believed, and I think, I feel pretty confident saying that they are a direct response to street gangs that were, created to protect community members from police violence. The first instance where we saw deputy gangs was actually at a peaceful protest in the East Los Angeles area. It was a protest held by mostly Latino people in response to the Vietnam War because young Latino men were the number one victim of, or I should say, the number one domestic casualty. So the most American soldiers that were killed in the Vietnam War happened to be Latino. So there was a huge protest in response to this in the East Los Angeles area in 1970, and a deputy gang called the Little Devils was said to be at this protest. They shot a number of people. They killed a number of people, including a journalist who had been looking into this. His name was Ruben Salazar. And the night before he was killed at this protest, he had actually told his friends that he suspected that he was under police surveillance and that he would be attacked. Less than 24 hours later, he was killed.
Is there some of these names, Little Devils, Vikings, Executioners? What are some of the names of these deputy gangs?
Yeah, there are about 18 that I have confirmed. I've heard anecdotally about a few more. Most of the themes with the names revolve around death. So you have things like the Grim Reapers, the Executioners, um, and you also have, there's also sort of like Western cowboy influence. So you have things like the Banditos, quite literally the cowboys, the rattlesnakes. And then you have just overtly racist ones. The Vikings, they take their name from Nordic tradition, and they have been said to be a white supremacist gang, as so described in a federal filing. You have gangs like the Wayside Whiteys that are explicitly, telling you in their name this is for white people only. Wayside Whiteys is said to be a KKK influence gang. Um, and I've heard anecdotally about a gang calling themselves the White Knights, which again is taking influence from the KKK.
Yeah, many years ago, it was the FBI put out a report. It might have been 15 years ago, but I'll never forget it. You know, being a melanated person in America, you don't forget certain things. And what they were reporting is that they had information that law enforcement in the military had been infiltrated by white supremacist elements. And it seems like ever since then, we've been getting more and more confirmation of it. So, who are these gangs? Are there gangs of different races? Are they primarily white or Latino? Or what's the makeup?
So all of the gangs have white supremacist themes in them. So most of them only allow members, or I'll say they do not allow Black members. They do not allow women to participate. There are some exceptions that are made. I have heard of members or of Black members in the white supremacist Vikings. What they will do is modify the tattoo slightly for members of color. The Black Vikings that I've heard of, instead of having a Viking wearing a helmet with two horns pointed up, they will have one horn pointed down. Not really sure what that means, but those are what you will see on people of color that are sort of exceptions to the rule when it comes to that sort of thing. I have heard of a all black gang called the Buffalo Soldiers, referred to sometimes as Black Ops. There have been very well documented. There's been a very well documented all Latino gang in the East Los Angeles station called the Banditos. Um, Again, although this is a mostly Latino gang, they do borrow a lot of white supremacist ideology. They target Black people. They target other Latinos. Most often Latinos that are maybe recently arrived in this country and do not speak English, that sort of thing.
Wow, that's amazing. Speaking with Cerise Castle, she's a reporter based in LA, and she's been doing tremendous work. I mean, I think you're based in LA, obviously, but in my opinion, I believe that this is something that this is something that everybody across the country should be paying attention to. I'm based in Cincinnati, and so I'm curious about my own sheriff department, my own law enforcement here, and I want to get to that. And you said some things when we were conversing via Instagram, which I kind of raised my eyes a bit. But you said Buffalo Soldiers, so you've got some of these deputy gangs, and I also want to ask you about the evidence that you have to back this up because this is a serious statement. But you said you have the Buffalo Soldiers. These are primarily Black sheriff deputies. Do they have a racist ideology? Are they racist against non-blacks, or are they sort of like the good guys? Are there any quote unquote good guy deputy gangs?
Unfortunately, no. All of the deputy gangs that I'm talking about, I actually identified them through lawsuits that were brought against the county as the result of someone dying or someone being physically assaulted to within inches of death. So, all of the deputy gangs that I'm talking about, these are gangs that are participating in violent crime. They are actively harming community members and often killing civilians. So these are not good guys by any stretch of the mind. When we're talking about the Buffalo Soldier specifically, it's important to remember that there is a very deep culture within police, regardless of location, of protecting other so-called brothers in blue, no matter what. So, and often this is called the blue code of silence. So it's incredibly difficult to really find out a lot about this secret culture that is happening within state agencies. But there are ways to do it. And again, I just want to shout out the Ida B. Wells Society for teaching me how to do that. One good way of doing that is, as I mentioned, looking at litigation, finding these paper trails. And in this instance, the paper trails were all based around truly atrocious violent acts that were being perpetuated by deputy gang members against innocent community members, really just for the fun of it. Um, and I forgot the second part of your question. I apologize.
Well, I just wondered, I wondered, well, I think you answered both. You answered all, actually. My question was primarily What is the motivation of the black deputy gangs? Are they racist against white
Ah,
people, or is it sort of like protect the blue? I think you kind of answered that.
mhm. There is one thing I want to add about the black deputy gangs. There is a man that is currently running for sheriff that has been alleged to be a member of this black deputy gang. His name is Cecil Rambo. Um, and if you look at his history, Mr. Rambo has been involved in at least three shootings. One where young people were involved. It's it's unclear from the paperwork that I reviewed if this person was a juvenile, but there is a chance that this person that he shot was under the age of 18. We know at least one person on the scene was under the age of 18. He shot a fellow officer in the midst of a police operation. And he admitted to me multiple times in an interview that I did with him that he was aware of deputy gangs from about at least 2 years after he entered the department, all the way up until the time that he left, and took no action. Um, so, you know, again, while someone may be a person of color, we do see very often that, race doesn't matter, and they are more interested in supporting the deputy gang structure rather than community interests, which in fact they are sworn to protect and serve.
It seems like a self-fulfilling prophecy, right? Because we've heard about the first time I heard about the concept of police being a gang was in popular culture. It was in hip hop, culture, movies, Boys in the Hood, things like that, in which people would say that the biggest gangs are the police. And now flashing forward, this seems to be true. And it's like there's going to be more distrust between the community and the police, which is going to fuel the fire for the deputy gangs. It's like a self-fulfilling prophecy. Wow, that's deep. Is there a competition? Why are there 18? Why are there so many? Why aren't there two or three? Right? Why is it so fractionalized? And is there competition between the deputy gangs? And what's the overall goal? What do they want?
Yeah, I don't really know what they want. I would say they want power, they want recognition, they want glory. And what that looks like inside their culture is being seen as a hard ass, is being seen as the guy that will kick down the door, shoot all the bad guys, and take no prisoners, which is really unfortunate because, I mean, this is the United States. We're not supposed to do extrajudicial killings here, but I'm sure as Black people, we all know that that happens all the time. I don't think that should be happening, and that stuff is, I mean, illegal at best, morally corrupt at worst, and I think we can all agree that both of those things are true. Um, why are there so many? Each station, it's been said, I haven't been able to confirm this, but it's been alleged that each station has its own gang, and within those, and the gangs are generational. So every 10, 15 years or so, a new gang will arise with a new generation of deputies that are coming in. The best example that we see this documented is in East LA. In the East LA gangs, all gangs, they number the tattoos, so you can kind of get a gauge on how many people there are. That's a great way of getting proof. Um, and in East LA specifically, when a gang hits 100 of numbering, they start over and they create a new gang. And that sort of times in with the generational processing that I was talking about. So the first gang that we have ever seen on record was in the East LA station in the 1970s called the Little Red Devils. About 10 years later, late 80s, 1990s, we see a new gang called the Cavemen that comes up and is the new generational gang in that station. Then in the early 2000s, you see the creation of the Banditos. And now in 2022, it's been alleged that the Banditos has hit 100 and a new gang and new ink is being created at the East Los Angeles station.
Which is the most powerful of the deputy gangs?
I would say they don't. I would say that, and this kind of
Or is
answers
that the
another
wrong way to look at
question.
it?
Yeah, I would say I would look at it differently. It's not that they compete with each other or one gang is more powerful than the other. These are all the same sorts of guys. They appreciate the same sorts of things, and they're all pretty chummy with each other, from what I've been able to tell. Um, and so when you become recognized as someone who is, you know, a hard charger, a badass, shoot 'em all type of guy, um, regardless of your gang affiliation, you are seen as a leader, as someone that should advance in the department, and that's usually what happens. They get promoted, they rise through the ranks, and they're put in charge of other units, other stations, and that ideology is then taught to the new recruits, and you see new generations of gangs being created.
Is there a? I'm still trying to figure out the motive. Is there a financial moment? Is this a? We know it's a criminal element, right? But is it a criminal element? Are they shaking down dope dealers? Are they rob stealing things like that? Or is it just as you said, I'm trying to get my bones so people think I'm the next John Wayne or the Rambo type.
Well, both of those things are connected. So when a police officer, you know, has a big bust or something, we all know about civil forfeiture, right? They get to keep that stuff. So there's definitely financial motivation. And with accolades from the department, that also comes with financial rewards. You get a medal and you get a bonus and you get a promotion, which means you get more money. If you're working on, you know, a big bust case where you've supposedly busted dealers, this is an incident that actually happened that I'm speaking about. Some deputy gang members raided here in California. I'm sure everyone knows we have legal marijuana and have had legal marijuana for many, many years, dating back to the early 1990s. Two deputy gang members raided a completely legal marijuana dispensary, planted evidence at the scene, and processed it as such. People went to jail for this. People that were quite literally at their jobs, um, were sent to jail for really no reason. And these officers were able to pass this off as, you know, hard police work where they busted some drug dealers. This is a business that has been approved by the city that people pay taxes to support. Um, you know, eventually it all fell apart in court, but people went to jail. People, you know, went through some very serious psychological damage as a result of that. And these officers, you know, they really didn't, they were punished, but they got to keep their jobs. They got to keep making, you know, $160,000 plus annually, just base salary. That's not overtime included. We pay our sheriff's officers very, very well out here in California. So it's a lot of different things. All of these things are interconnected.
Has it been? I hear you talking about the sheriff deputies, but I don't hear you talking about the LAPD. Now, those are two different entities. Have
Yes,
you found any evidence that there are gangs within the LAPD? And
I
if
have.
not,
Yes.
why not?
Yes, I have seen evidence of gangs inside the LAPD. I think most people nationally are familiar, with the Rampart scandal and the crash unit. This happened in the 90s. This was a gang of Los Angeles police officers that were committing armed robbery of banks, and it's been alleged by other police officers that this same unit had was involved in the death of the rapper Biggie Smalls. So, you know, and this is happening, and it's been said by even our own sheriff that this stuff is happening in every department. I've heard from police officers across the United States saying, Cerise, like, you need to come investigate my department because I'm seeing this happening and I don't know what to do because it's everyone from the higher ups all the way down.
Wow. Wow. When I reached out to you, I mentioned to you that I lived in Cincinnati, Ohio, and you mentioned that perhaps you'd heard some things about our sheriff's department here. What have you heard about the Hamilton County Sheriff's Department or the Cincinnati Police Department?
I've heard a lot of things about your sheriff's department, actually. Um, I've heard from activists, many different activists in the city of Cincinnati, who I won't name, for their safety, but I've been sent photos of things that appear to be gang insignias, different logos on cars, uniforms. Some particular officers have been identified to me as people of interest. But I must say, Cincinnati is probably the city I hear from the most often in regards to police gangs.
Is that right? That's
Yes.
right, because we have historic collaborative agreement. We have a new Democrat sheriff, and on the outside looking in, it appears that we're a model, and in some ways we are for the whole country. I will say though that there's a case that just jumped in my head. There's a case of a Cincinnati police officer who was dealing with activists at City Hall, I believe, last year, and they were very vocal, and the mayor asked them to be removed, and as the Cincinnati police officer was removing them, the activist alleged that he flashed a white supremacist sign, and this went all the way to the Ohio Supreme Court because he wanted to sue them anonymously. And I remember looking at the video and I thought, that's really strange. That's very, very strange that you would make that kind of hand gesture. And it was like the okay hand gesture, right?
Hmm.
Which could have double meaning. And it was something that we talked about for a short time here. Then it kind of died away in Cincinnati. So when you said that, it really piqued my interest. You said of all the places around the country, you hear from Cincinnati the most.
Yes,
Wow.
definitely. And
That's
it's different people that don't appear to know each other, which just gives it more credibility, in my opinion.
Yeah, most deaf. So I guess it's safe to say that this is potentially an issue that people should be concerned about all over the country. How would one, like I'm in Cincinnati, what would be the first step to doing further investigation, in your opinion, to figure out whether we have an issue in our own local law enforcement agencies?
Yeah, definitely. And this is something that I recommend to anyone that has these questions about their local law enforcement agencies. Um, it isn't always easy to find this stuff out, but it can be done, and I encourage everyone to stick with it. It's really important to get this stuff out there. The first thing that you can do is file a public records request. And that's how I found out about all the deputy gangs in Los Angeles. It turned out that the county had been keeping a list of all the litigation related to that. And I found out about that by going back and listening to all of our Board of Supervisors meetings. The Board of Supervisors is the group that oversees county governance here in LA. So I listened to quite a few months worth of meetings and I found something on the agenda that was asking for this list to be made. So I put in a records request for that list. And from there, I was able to use that list as a roadmap to find the deputy gangs. So it's, going and looking at city government because they get up to a lot when we're not looking. I think that's sort of what they're banking on. So investigating like what's happening with the city government and what they're looking at, and that can help you find things that exist that can help you on this journey of investigation. I would also recommend anyone interested in doing this type of investigative work to check out that workshop that I did. It's free. It's offered by the Ida B. Wells Society. It's free to join the society, and you can access a wealth of information that deals a lot with this stuff and will quite literally teach you how to do it. Can't recommend them enough. It's also important to understand things like the Police Officer Bill of Rights, qualified immunity. Those are legal systems that are set up to keep these structures in place. The reason that, you know, these police officers can't be personally sued and held accountable. Um, so I just want to make clear that like when a family like sues after a loved one has been killed, they have to sue the county. They can't sue the police officer that actually pulled the trigger and killed their loved one because of qualified immunity. Qualified immunity makes it so they are not liably responsible. It's this neat exception that lawyers invented for police officers that gives them license to kill people and face no repercussions. And that must be stopped in order to make any sort of changes as far as this is concerned. Another element of that is the Peace Officer Bill of Rights, which means that when an officer is under investigation for something like that, they actually get to review all the evidence with an attorney and a union representative during work hours before they have to answer any questions. And those questions have to be asked while they are on the clock. So they're getting paid to answer these questions about a potential crime that they are involved in. And also, while they are sitting with that union rep, they have that union rep in their ear telling them what to say so that the shooting, whatever, meets the standard of qualified immunity so they
Right.
can't be held responsible.
Right.
Those things working in concert make it so we can't make any changes.
Right.
So I encourage everyone to tap in with local campaigns looking to get rid of this stuff because that work has been going on for a long time. And it's important to, I'm sure everyone is outraged by this conversation. It's horrible to talk about this stuff. And it's stuff that we all know that has been happening. And I think it's very important to channel that outrage into what is happening within our collective to change this stuff, because the more of us that are aware and talking about this and working to make that change, the faster it can happen.
Somebody wants to know what about Kentucky? Have you heard anything about Kentucky, and if so, what?
um I would say Kentucky and just the South writ large, a lot of reporters I've talked to, they tell me, oh, like they don't necessarily need deputy gangs in the South because that's just how that's just how it works. They don't need this sort of uh not almost like secrecy, like an anonymity behind a name, a group,
Right. I
because
would say
it's
secret
just,
society almost.
yeah. And that doesn't exist because it's just so entwined. A colleague of mine was doing work in Tennessee, I want to say, which is close to Kentucky. And yeah, I was describing for her just some of the stuff that deputy gangs do, like planting evidence. I told that story earlier, and I was like, yeah, this is like textbook deputy gang stuff. And she was just saying to me, like, yeah, we've seen stuff like that done by assistant chiefs. Um, and it's just sort of business as usual down here. They don't need that, layer to commit these crimes. They're perfectly comfortable doing it in the open because it's been done that way, really since the founding of the country down here.
Get it? That kind of makes sense, actually. Cerise Castle is my guest. She's a reporter working with Knock LA and exposing the history of deputy gangs in Los Angeles and beyond. And Cerise, I really appreciate the time. Just a few more questions if you've got the time. Going back to LA, and I need to ask this question so that we can play both sides of this. What is the evidence? What is the proof? Right? Some
Yeah.
people are going to watch this and say, you know what? Allegedly, here we go, more of this Black Lives Matter conspiracy trying to make the police look bad and vilify us. What is the evidence that you have?
Yeah, I say allegedly, because the cutoff date for me getting sued is in about another 10 days from now. Um, so it's alleged. But in 10 days, they can't sue me for defamation, so I can drop that. And I want to point that out because it's really legal protection, right? That's why I'm saying allegedly. Um, but I do have tons of proof. Um, you can't see my filing cabinet, but it's over there. This stuff, like, this is this is all stuff that I uncovered that the county knew about, that the federal government knew about. The testimony that I'm looking at is sworn depositions of deputies saying, yes, I am in a gang. Yes, I have watched this gang do this thing. Um, I have pages of that. I have photos of these tattoos. Um, I have other people that have participated in these deputy gangs that have since left them telling me that guy was in the gang, that guy was in the gang, that guy was in the gang, um, which is very powerful. Um, yeah, and I'll say I went through a very rigorous fact-checking process for this series. None of this stuff would have been published had it not met, a very high editorial standard. And everything that is in that series, we've hyperlinked to the files and documents that collaborate the claims. And those are available for anyone that may have questions or want to do their own verification of my work.
Cerise, people are asking about your safety. Daryl wants to know, have you been getting death threats
Of course.
and backlash from exposing these killer gangs in the police department?
Yeah, unfortunately, yes. Right after we published, it was a deluge of death threats that I was receiving via text message, phone call, social media. Um, that's died off for the most part. I do get weird calls every now and then, but I've gotten better at screening them. Um, I have been threatened by this is an election year here in LA County. The campaign manager of our sheriff threatened to post my home address. Um, the I was They attempted to arrest me at a press conference that I was attending, as a reporter. I had RSVP to. I had my press lanyard on. They attempted to arrest me. So now I have a bodyguard that I have to pay for to come with me to do my job. The sheriff of Los Angeles County just last week, he has a radio program for some reason here in LA, which is legally sketchy at best. There are some potential FCC violations there because this is an election year. You can't have a candidate just having an hour of open airtime without giving that same opportunity to others. So that's a whole other story. But on this radio show last week, he spent an hour just bashing me, trashing me, threatening me, really. So yeah, I get threatened quite a bit, quite often. Um, but can
I
I
mean,
swear?
Cerise, if we're dealing with individuals, and as you say, part of the initiation process to get in some of these deputy gangs is to actually, is it to harm someone seriously or to kill someone?
Kill,
To
yes,
kill someone.
yes, yeah.
And so if you're dealing with individuals that'll kill innocent people just to get into a gang, they would have no qualms with harming you, especially
Yeah,
when you're targeting them.
it's something I think about a lot. I've been in many situations where, I've seen deputies, like, grab their guns for, no reason, just, like, talking. And it's something that, I've thought about. It would be really easy to just shoot and kill me, because we would see it almost on a monthly basis here in LA. It's only March 18th, and the sheriff's department has killed 4 people this year. Um, and the one that they killed last week, he was a man that was just literally driving by in his car, and they surrounded his car and shot him. So it would be really easy to just kill me, and probably nothing would happen. But I really don't care. I can't imagine doing anything else at this point in my life. And I think, it's going on shows like this and talking about this so openly, and telling the community that this is happening. That's what protects me, keeps me safe. And I hope that it will extend to other people in the community as well. The more I'm talking about, you know, the guys that can't come on, shows like this, like the guy that was killed, 23-year-old random young man just trying to get home from work. Like, I hope talking about his death, and talking about this issue just makes people more aware. And through that awareness and people tapping in and getting involved with this stuff, it makes it stop.
So you feel like the media attention is offering you a blanket of protection because if something
Definitely.
happens to you, then that legitimizes what you're saying. It's like, oh, but people die under mysterious circumstances. Sometimes it looks like it's an accident, and it really isn't. So I really do, sister, wish you the best and hope that you are protected in what you're doing in your journey. I think it's very important. Someone wants to know, how can we support you or support you financially for your protection? Do you have a Patreon page or
Oh, thank you
GoFundMe
so
or
much.
anything like that?
Yeah, you can support my work by I have my Venmo, PayPal, Cash App information on my Instagram, which is at Your Majesty. It's spelled, instead of TYCEE. And yeah, I think it's also important. We asked how people can get involved earlier. It's to talk about how, again, the system is set up to keep this information from people. So it costs money to access a lot of these records, right? And the government can really charge whatever the hell they want. There is no set price, and it varies greatly from one jurisdiction to another and even from state to federal court. I spent $4,000 just trying to find out this stuff, and I had to like make decisions like, okay, I'm not going to spend $400 on that case file because I need to spend it on this case file where 4 people got killed. So it's important to keep that in mind, and there's a reason for that, right? Like they don't really want this information to be easily accessible to people. So I do thank that viewer for that question, um, and I appreciate any support that can be given because, yeah, unfortunately, the system is set up to limit people from finding this out from a financial perspective.
Last question, Cerise, is I wonder why this is being allowed to continue. Because as you said earlier, you said people know about it, right? People inside of law enforcement know about it. The good guys inside of law enforcement know about it. Is this too big to fail? Is it too big to handle? Or do the powers that be feel like, hey, so what? It ultimately fits our goal. Why is this allowed to continue, in your opinion?
Yeah. I think it's all of those things. I think for a long time, people really didn't care because this was happening to poor people that were Black, poor people that were brown. And, these are people that are already incredibly at a systemic disadvantage. So it was easy for the government to just look the other way and not care. And what you were saying about playing into their goal, yeah, I've talked to people that, work with police officers, and they've told me that there are cases that happen in, Black areas where people are under a certain income threshold where the police just won't take any action, where people are selling guns, killing people, and the police know that this is happening. They know who is doing it, and they just say, we're not going to do anything. And I think that it was the case 50 years ago. It continues to be the case today. I think the attention has made it politically advantageous for some people to take action. So you see more people willing to take action. Also think that we're more aware now as a society. I think that white people are more open to hearing these things and believing us the first time when we say that this is happening. And that has helped, more accountability happen. And it's other people of color too, right? Not all skin folk are kin folk. I think it's everyone just sort of like realizing like, yes, this is real, this is happening. And that's helped. But I also still think we have a very long way to go to change this.
Yeah, you just said a mouthful right there. When you said white people are more open, it's a damn shame that it should matter that much. But you're right. And unless we get allies on these kind of issues, history has shown us there's not going to be any movement. What's next for you? Is there more to this? Is there another level or layer that you want to bring to this particular story? But what's next for you?
Yeah, so I actually have a podcast coming out, which is going to be talking about all of these things, sort of an audio version of the series that I did, as well as additional reporting that I have uncovered over the past year. That will be out in October. And I am continuing to write about the Sheriff's Department, deputy gangs inside the Sheriff's Department at Knock LA. And I continually post updates on this stuff on my Twitter and my Instagram. So if you want to keep up on just like the day-to-day developments, definitely follow me there.
I certainly will. Cerise, thank you so much. I sent you a friend request on Facebook. If you've got the capacity, please.
Oh, of course.
Yeah, please.
I'm not on Facebook a lot, but I will.
Yeah, I just want to stay connected to whatever you got going on. And if you hear anything about Hamilton County Sheriff deputies or Cincinnati, please let me know. Please let me know so I can let the community know, okay? Stay safe, sis, and let's stay connected.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Most def. That's Cerise Castle. She's a reporter with Knock LA. And again, I thought it was one of the best interviews I've ever seen on The Breakfast Club. I mean, I'm down with them. I meant to ask her. Hold on one second. Cerise, you still here? I
Yeah,
meant
I'm
to
here.
ask you about the Breakfast Club and how you got on the show, and has that show, what's it like, and has it been a platform, which obviously we know it has been, but has it been a platform to just be to amplify your message?
Yeah, I'm so grateful to the Breakfast Club. I have really wanted to get this story into more Black spaces, because while I don't think this is a new concept to Black people, I think it's important to arm other Black people with this information, and help them, help us really find out about how we can, disseminate this information and continue to find out more. And the Breakfast Club has opened so many doors, in that arena. And I'm incredibly grateful to them. I was connected with that show through an old boss of mine, by the name of Erica Alexander. You may have seen her on a little show called Living Single.
Yeah.
Um, she's great. She's been very supportive of my reporting, and she has been an incredible advocate for, getting me in these spaces like the Breakfast Club, so this
Wow.
information
Okay.
can be shared.
Yeah, I've seen her on there several times. So she's got a relationship, and she connected you. That's great. That's great. What was it like? I mean, because that's like, for our culture right now, that's like how, that's this spot to be. I'm just curious. What
Yeah.
was that like?
Oh man, I still can't believe I did that. It was a great experience. Angela Yee, had been in touch with me, for a couple of weeks leading up to it. She's been reading the reporting and asking me questions about it in communication. She's very, invested in getting this information out there. Um, I will say that the studio looks a lot bigger on TV.
It's a small little radio pod. I've been there. Okay. Well, again, Cerise, thank you so much for your time, and I really appreciate you. I wish you the best.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate you having me here. Thank you.
Absolutely. Absolutely. That's Cerise Castle. Props to the Breakfast Club, man. They do great work. I've always said it. I respect people that's doing great work. They do great work. And I came across that interview, and I thought, wow, I want to bring that to my audience. I want us here in Cincinnati and beyond to know about what's going on. So props to her. Listen, folks, that's it. For the few people that missed it, please share this as much as possible, so that people in your friends list and your circle share it in as many spaces on Facebook as possible, and on YouTube as possible. I'll make clips and put it out as well, because I understand the world we live in now. And when you see it, please share it. And again, props to Cerise. Thank you so much. And now you can get back to your afternoon. I'll leave you alone. Have a great weekend. We'll talk on Monday.